welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to be talking about becoming Cody Rhodes. The documentary series that has the internet all abuzz with 40-second clips taken out of context, and everybody's very angry about everything that happened in this thing. Well, except that they don't really care about any of the other stuff. They just care about the AEW parts. That's the only parts that they care about. It was a very good documentary. I think it was tremendous. WWE always finds a way to create these compelling, epic documentaries that are slightly revisionist. Of course, everybody, is pitching a bitch about the AEW thing, about them being called a secondary promotion. Some of the AEW hardcores are very upset that, Cody is being positioned as being the front man of AEW when it was really Nick Khan was talking to Matt Jackson. And I'm like, okay, sure. All right. I'm not saying that you're lying. I'm saying it doesn't matter, and we'll talk about why it doesn't matter in a minute. But let's go through this because I was actually far more interested in some of the other things because I genuinely knew a lot about Cody already. He's been a part of several WWE documentaries. He's a part of the Dusty Rhodes documentary when they had one for the DVD. He was a part of that already. He was a part of the Dusty Rhodes documentary that took place on A&E. So there's a great deal of Cody's story that's already out there. And this documentary covered pretty much all of that. The parts that was primarily about Cody that I think were very interesting was the part where we got to like 2010, 2011, where he's starting to come into his own and he's doing the dashing Cody Rhodes thing. Now, this makes perfect sense in the context of what they was talking about just in the scene before this, which is how difficult it is to create your own path when you're the son and or daughter of a legend, that you have to create your own thing instead of constantly reminding people of who your father is or who your, mama is, or in some instances. And this was his opportunity to break out, to do something different, and dashing Cody Rhodes was something he truly believed in, and it already had a natural out to it. There was already this idea that he would get hit in the face, and that would lead to the Rip Hamilton, American Psycho Cody, and he would just kind of flourish from there. That was kind of built into the gimmick, that he wouldn't get hit in the face, and then he would get hit in the face, and then that would change his character. And compare that to Stardust and the creation of Stardust, which I always found very interesting because I don't remember how we got into Stardust. I just remember I think he became Stardust. I don't know what the angle was, what the story was that led from him being the son of Dusty Rhodes to being Little Goldust. I don't know what happened. But to see the concept art that they had in the documentary with all the crazy outfits, that was very superhero with like stars and stuff coming off the collar and everything. It was pretty crazy. He even said at one point that Stardust was supposed to wear a mask, and he said it felt like it was a condom on his head. But seeing that, it was very cool. That part of the documentary was very cool. And he said it ended up just becoming a mini Goldust. And he took the character seriously. He worked the character seriously, even though he became very jokerish with all the laughing and the, I used to call him Jim Carrey's Riddler. I don't know how many times if you guys have saw Jim Carrey as the Riddler in, what was that, Batman and Robin, I think it was, which is an awful movie. But how Jim Carrey played that role, that's how Cody was as Stardust. He was so loud and so over the top that it kind of was entertaining for a little while. But then, of course, it got annoying over time, of course. But they talked about how he was Stardust for like a year. He started trying to get frustrated. He thought that the character was beneath him. He started trying to get out of it. There was no way Stardust was going to be a main event talent. That's pretty much well understood. And he started saying that he became bitter, became frustrated. And he had reached essentially rock bottom. And then Dusty actually started to complain on his behalf, saying, hey, this kid's got everything. I know he's my son, but, he's got everything. What are you guys not seeing? And he says that Dusty gave him the idea to quit. Now, this is very interesting to me because they started talking about this when it comes to NXT, how they started calling them Dusty's kids. And you got Dusty grooming Seth Rollins, and he's working with Roman Reigns, and he's working with all these other talents, Sasha Banks and all of them. And his own son, his very own son, is Stardust at the same time. And Cody said it was like, your dad had a team that you couldn't play on. And I was like, wow, I never really thought about that, because I always looked at these two things as being separate, because Cody was out of WWE for 6 years. I never really considered that, hey, this was parallel. He was Stardust, at the same time where his dad was, grooming the next several main eventers on the main roster. People who main evented WrestleMania, people who won world titles at WrestleMania, and his very own son was Stardust at virtually the bottom of the card at the same time. And you can tell that Cody started saying, like, he started resenting the NXT talent because they were being called Dusty's kids, because they had so much time with Dusty, and because he was lending his name and his cachet to these other talents, and it was actually benefiting them, but it wasn't benefiting him, who was truly Dusty's son. And that bit of jealousy there, I think, is very real, and I like that they talked about it, and I like that Cody is honest about it. Look, I take about 70% of what Cody says as absolute bullshit. I think he's one of the most disingenuous people ever, an absolute snake oil salesman. But I believe that. I believe that he really did get bothered by the NXT system being Dusty's system and all of these people being Dusty's kids. I think that legitimately bothered him. I think it legitimately got under his skin. And he said basically that Dusty was telling him to quit while he was lending advice and help to all of these other kids. And he kind of felt like, why not me? And then, of course, Dusty passes away, and he's still Stardust. And this is another interesting bit, because he felt like he wasn't ready to go back to being Cody Rhodes yet after Dusty died. He saw Stardust as he's had a suit of armor that he could wear while he was grieving. That he didn't want to be Cody Rhodes at the time. But this lasted for another 8 months, so for 8 more months, he was Stardust, and he was, frustrated and pissed off and upset. And then that finally is what led him to quit. He was talking about drinking on the job. I think he said he was drinking out of a thermos or something like that, not to get drunk, but just to get caught, in the hopes that he would get fired, because he didn't want to quit. He felt like he would let his mom down, like he would upset his mom if he quit. So he didn't want to quit. He wanted them to fire him. And he found out that that was not going to happen. So he ultimately had to tap out because he wasn't going to get fired. And he kind of, and this, I think, another little bit of truth, by saying he knew as a legacy, especially the son of Dusty Rhodes, he was probably not going to get fired. It's going to take a lot for him to get fired. And he just couldn't see any other way out of the Stardust gimmick outside of quitting. And I say, like, man, imagine being trapped in a suit that you can't get out of. Like to say he even went to Vince and Triple H and said, I'm not putting this suit on unless, I'm going to tell a story about getting out of it. And then basically it didn't work out for him, and that the writers were ignoring him. And I think, like, this is very important. This is very important stuff, because I can relate to having a dead end job. I think most people can. And he was a guy who, at this point in time, he was almost 10 years into WWE. He had been there so long. He had built his life around it. They figured he was never going to leave. He was never going anywhere. And he was going to settle in the mid card of the roster. And he wasn't going to ever reach where he felt like he needed to go. And then Triple H chimes in by saying that, when you have goals and dreams or whatever, you're in a rush to get there. And I felt like that was his way of saying that Cody had all of these ideas of what he wanted to do, but he didn't want to take the time to get there. You know, he needed to mature, I think. And this kind of goes back to the earlier part of the documentary too, where Cody felt like he got pulled out of OVW too soon. And I said, like, maybe all that was true. You know, like that's something we should really consider when we talk about guys being in WWE for so long and not actually breaking through. Sometimes a guy is there too long. You know, sometimes a guy is called up to the main roster too soon. Sometimes a guy is given a lot too soon. Sometimes a guy, you just don't know who he is. And with Cody, that was the issue. You know, they didn't know who he was outside of being the son of Dusty Rhodes. So when he left, that was his opportunity to define who he is. Now, this, of course, becomes very important to the AEW story. Now, here's why that is. Now, on the independents, they showed with Cody working all these independents and, you know, Ring of Honor and Impact, et cetera, et cetera. Now, they didn't mention this in the biography or the documentary, but Drew McIntyre had did something similar. You know, when he got fired from WWE, he basically went on a tour of the Indies, you know, went back to Europe, did all of this stuff to make himself the hottest free agent in the business, even going to Impact, becoming the world champion there. And that kind of set the blueprint for Cody, who was, when he got out, that was, you know, same mindset. He didn't reach the same heights as Drew McIntyre because Cody was different, you know, like he didn't stay in Impact very long, which was, I think, part of the reason why the character ended up blowing up because he didn't stay in Impact very long, but he's still trying to figure out who he is. It was partly you got to shed Stardust and you have to work very hard for people to not see you as Stardust anymore. Then you have to work very hard to become something else. Then you have to establish what that thing is. And this is part of your journey is, you know, as a person, you are your father's son. And then you go from being your father's son to being your own man. Then you have to be a father yourself. You know, this is all just basic archetypes of human lifespans or whatever. If you're a woman, it's the same thing, okay? So he had gone through the part of being Dusty's son. Now is at the part of how can I define myself as being different from Dusty? And going out, becoming NWA World Champion, becoming Ring of Honor World Champion, being a top star in some indie promotions, working in New Japan, stuff like this, he started to find out who he is. Now, I really enjoy that he gave New Japan the credit for coming up with the American Nightmare, the name, because he says like, okay, now he's kind of figured it out. And it's a little bit of Stardust. It's a little bit of Cody Rhodes from 2011. It's a little bit of dashing Cody Rhodes. It's a little bit of everything. And it was his opportunity to show people that the Cody Rhodes that was there in WWE in 2011 or 2012 was supposed to just keep going, was supposed to keep growing. And that it was now a chance for him to become distinct from Dusty. And I thought that was very important. Now, one of the first AEW digs that people really didn't pay attention to because they were watching the 40-second clips is how they kept using the term forbidden door at this point. Like they started talking about how, you know, before it was cool, before it became a thing, Cody was doing the forbidden door where he wanted to take the American Nightmare from this place to this place to this place and everybody gets a little bit of it. And then he starts dyeing his hair, saying that, you know, for a while it was about making people forget Dusty, but now I want people to remind them of Dusty. And he felt like he earned the right to dye his hair. So then we get to All In. Now, of course, All In is a seminal piece of the AEW history. Now, the All In comes from the challenge Dave Meltzer laid out on Twitter. Well, it wasn't really a challenge as much as it was a question that he was asked about whether an independent wrestling show could sell 10,000 seats. And Meltzer said, not anytime soon. And then Cody immediately jumped on it and took up the challenge. And then, of course, they went and did it, you know. So this, of course, is the genesis of AEW, by the way. because there probably wouldn't be an AEW if there was no All In. And I know that that's not part of the AEW mythology. Like, they have their telling of their history. But without All In, tell me AEW probably would not be happening right now, okay? So Cody and the Young Bucks, they put together All In. They tell the story of this show about taking the best of the best from the independents. And Brandy says it's a perfect marriage of timing, talent, and fandom, bringing everything together. And Cody called this the peak of his career because now he's building something else. He's doing something different. And he's doing the business part. You know, he's on the office side of All In. And of course, it ended up being a big success, which led to AEW in 2019. Now, these people will have you believe that these two things are separate. You know, a lot of the AEW, when they build their mythology, they look at these two things as separate entities. There was All In, and then there was AEW. But trust me, if it was no All In, AEW would not exist the way that it is. Because who ended up being all the executive vice presidents of AEW? All the people who put together All In. So you can't tell me that that didn't occur. So when people start saying that, WWE is being revisionist by having Matt Jackson was the one who was talking to Tony Khan about, you know, putting together a wrestling promotion. It's like, okay, maybe that was the case, but we had already done All In at this point. You had already done proof of concept. Part of that was Cody putting his balls on the table, saying we could sell 10,000 tickets using Ring of Honor's equipment and everything, right? These guys were working for Ring of Honor at the time, and Ring of Honor had never done anything near that. Okay, so they created something completely different. They didn't use Ring of Honor's banner in order to do it. They didn't even use Ring of Honor's name to draw that event. They did it off of pure indie wrestling. So, of course, it was going to blossom into something else. And then you go from AEW, and then Cody is positioned as being the guy who helped lead the competition for 3 years. And this, of course, pissed off a lot of people because they say, well, Cody didn't lead the competition. It wasn't like his idea. It was like, well, I remember I had this channel. This channel existed when AEW first started. Who was the guy doing almost all of the media for AEW? Answer is Cody Rhodes. When you have, you know, we need to sit down with Sports Illustrated or with some other magazine to talk about AEW. What is it going to be? What is the pay structure going to be? You know, what kind of talent are going to be featured? What's going to be the creative? All this kind of stuff. It was all Cody. There was no, even if the Young Bucks were there, which of course they were not the PR, the front man for AEW. They were just guys in the office. Okay. Cody was being positioned as being the front man for AEW for at least the first year and a half or so. And then, you know, of course, Tony Khan took over as time goes on. But they start talking about AEW. Now, Cody's saying, hey, working without a contract. Brandy is saying the contracts are not being renewed on time. That's starting to, you know, become a problem. And then Cody gets a call from Bruce Pritchard, or he calls Bruce Pritchard, however that goes. And the big meeting in Atlanta is set up where Vince goes down to meet with Cody. Well, Cody said, look, he just wanted to have a conversation. I wanted to apologize for his behavior on his way out, how he, you know, quit the company and everything. And he wanted closure. So to talk to these guys one last time, look at them almost not as a peer, but as somebody who has actually, you know, improved his life quite a bit from leaving WWE. And Vince basically, you know, put his money on the table and said, look, we're trying to bring you back in. You know, we're buying the American Nightmare. That's what we're here for. And then we start talking about why he left. Then we get the NDA portion, which he didn't say it, but he says he can't talk about why he left AEW. That's already suspicious. Why can't you talk about why you left AEW? But he says it had nothing to do with money. And it had nothing to do with other talent. He left for personal reasons. He left for personal reasons. What would those personal reasons be? What would make you so upset that you would leave a company that you have been essentially the face of for 3 years? Why would you leave? And look, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'll put it out there. I don't care. It's very very suspicious to me that as soon as CM Punk comes in, Cody goes out, you know? And the reason why that's very suspicious to me is because, as I've said on this channel before, Cody and CM Punk have had words, all right? There was Cody telling stories with Jericho about CM Punk being embarrassed in the locker room. Then there was Punk making snide remarks about Cody on Twitter, where he outed Cody as trying to recruit him to AEW and saying that he doesn't, he doesn't negotiate through DMs or something like that, or through text message or something like that, which kind of was an attack on Cody. And it wasn't long before CM Punk came in that Cody was out. Now, I'm not saying that there's heat between the two, but I'm saying they shared a locker room before, all right? And there apparently there was no good stories that came out of that situation. And then Cody left, which would be the only reason I would think that he would leave. I mean, the idea that Tony Khan took all the power away from these guys, the fact that Cody couldn't be world champion in AEW, all of that might be true. There might be some truth to all of that. But to me, the only reason why I would see him leaving is if there was something there that made him so uncomfortable. And now he says he can't talk about it. Okay, so does that mean it involves Tony Khan then? If it's not CM Punk and the Young Bucks and him falling out with all of those guys, which clearly he has not, because he can still talk to them. And he talked to them into using Being the Elite footage for his documentary, so they don't have any beef. You know, why would he still be beefing? Why would he be beefing with them? Why would he be beefing with Kenny Omega? You know, who else would he have any problems with in AEW unless it's CM Punk or Tony Khan? I mean, who else could it be? Who else could it be? Or maybe somebody said something about Brandy. Who knows? But in any event, this leads to Triple H's comment when he says that, you don't grow up to be the champion or the face of a secondary promotion. You grow up wanting to be the champion of WWE. So now the internet's on fire. Triple H says that AEW is a secondary promotion. It's like, what is he supposed to call it? They've called it the alternative. They've called it, another promotion. They've called it all sorts of stuff, euphemisms and stuff going on through this documentary. So secondary promotion. I mean, even Tony Khan calls WWE the market leader. Even he does that. So how is this in any way a slight? How is it an offense in any way to call it a secondary promotion? It's like when you say secondary, you say secondary to who? Like secondary to WWE, who is the largest wrestling company to ever exist. Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. TNA was a secondary promotion. WCW was number one for a short time, and then it became a secondary promotion. It happens. It's not about a talent, and I know Triple H called it a pissant promotion years ago. He's giving them a little bit more respect now, but calling them secondary and not calling them, pissants. But ultimately, that shouldn't have been a big deal. And why everybody is tripping over that, it makes no sense. But Cody says that this was his opportunity to do the first dream he ever had, which is to bring the WWE Championship back to Dusty. And that's reason enough. I know that, there's, again, the AEW mythology was that he booked himself so he couldn't ever win the title there and all that sort of stuff. It's like, you realize Cody was world champion in Ring of Honor. He was world champion in NWA. He was NWA world champion just like his dad was. That wasn't fulfilling enough. He had already done this world champion thing more than once. And it didn't fill the right hole in his heart. It had to be the WWE title. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate, to be quite honest, that Cody took the leap. And this was another very underrated dig that they made, that the forbidden door swings both ways. That was tough. That was a good one. That forbidden door dig, I like that one. I like that one more than the secondary promotion thing. I like that whole forbidden door swings both ways. I like that. So basically that was it. The rest of it was about his injury and all that kind of stuff, which we already know. So Cody, of course, gets choked up at one point because, again, he's very emotional. And he says that never had he ever called WWE home in public. But then he called it home. He said he couldn't have asked for a better one in this documentary. And I thought that was important too. This is a place where earlier in the documentary he talked about growing up literally in front of the WWE audience. And he even talked about that when they played a promo that he had done at an indie show about how he grew up in front of them. And that does endear people to you. And that is very, very underrated. That when people get to watch your story unfold, they do become more and more attached to you. And Cody does benefit from that. That he was brought in at 20 years old. Now the guy's 36 or 37. 17 years almost straight of being on television in one form or another. Even when he left WWE, he was still on TV because he was working in Impact for time to time. And he was working in Ring of Honor. And he was working in New Japan, which was also being played over here on Access TV, if I remember correctly. So he was always in the mix, you know. That stuff was important. You know, that stuff was watching the growth of Cody come from a kid. You don't know who he is outside of being Dusty's son, to him being Stardust and Dashing and all this kind of stuff, to him leaving. And it comes back full circle. And, you know, they say he left the WWE as a kid. He came back as a man, or that he returned like the conquering hero after, you know, being the front man for another promotion for 3 years. And you look at it, and I could tell you that's Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. You know, you have to leave your father's home, go on your own adventure, find out who you are, you know, face the dangers, overcome that struggle, and then you return, you know, to your family with a boon. That's a hero's journey. And I see that here, having seen it unfold in front of me. And I tell you, this documentary was bang on about telling that story. And I wish they had waited until like right before he won the title to play this, or they would have waited for him to win it and then make this. That's the only thing I've been having a problem with, is these documentaries for Cody would have hit a lot different if he was the champion. Like if he was the champion in this documentary, I think it would have been a wonderful exclamation point, a wonderful period on his career and on his life. But I guess we'll have to wait a couple of more months before that actually happens. Overall, though, I think this is a wonderful piece of art. I know the AEW fans are pretty much upset. That's just too bad. WWE going to write their own history? Yeah, sure, but AEW does too. So it's not that big of a deal. So what did you guys think? I know a lot of people watched it. It was a little long though. It was 2 hours, but I think they was going really in depth for his life, and I thought it was good. You know, so let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They just